Hi, I'm Kate, and this is the version of Romeo and Juliet that I tell to my classes. Romeo and Juliet. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Our story takes place a long time ago in Verona, where there once lived two rich and powerful families, the Montagues and the Capulets. But for as long as anyone could remember, these two families had been embroiled in a fiery feud. This endless quarrel was turning Verona into a dark and dangerous place. The city was divided and duels were commonplace. Outraged by the constant violence, Prince Aeschylus, Verona's ruler, declared to his kingdom, "I will tolerate no more acts of violence. The next person who dares continue to disturb the peace will be sentenced to death." One summer evening, the Capulets were busy preparing to host their annual masquerade ball, to which everyone was invited, except the Montagues, of course. Paris, a kinsman of the prince, had visited Lord Capulet that morning to ask for his daughter Juliet's hand in marriage. Though thrilled at the prospect of such a fine match, Lord Capulet asked him to wait 2 years, since Juliet was not yet 14, but invited him to the party in the hope that he would begin to win her heart. Meanwhile, a young Montague named Romeo discovered that Rosaline, the girl he loved but who would not return his affections, had also been invited to the party. Encouraged by his two friends, Mercutio and Benvolio, the three decided to sneak into the Capulet feast that night, uninvited, disguised by their masks. Once inside, the three friends danced amidst the crowds of courtly folk, all dressed in their velvets and satins, encrusted with bright, brilliant jewels. Just then, in the distance, Romeo caught sight of a girl so beautiful that all the world seemed vain and worthless compared to her. He fell in love with her instantly and forgot about Rosaline completely. "Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night." As Romeo continued to watch Juliet, entranced, a young Capulet named Tybalt suddenly recognised him. Tybalt, so enraged that a Montague dare sneak into a Capulet feast uninvited, drew his sword to attack, but was held back by Lord Capulet so as not to upset the guests. Meanwhile, Romeo made his way nearer to his fair lady, declared his love, and the two kissed without even knowing each other's names. It was only at the end of the night, thanks to Juliet's nurse, that the pair discovered each other's true identity. The new lovers were distraught. They had fallen in love, yet their families were sworn enemies. Later that night, Romeo climbed Juliet's balcony. "Call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth I never shall be Romeo," he cried. The next morning, very early, Romeo ran to Friar Lawrence, a priest, and begged him to marry him to Juliet without delay. Friar Lawrence agreed to help the two lovers in secret, since he thought that once they were married, their parents might soon find out and the match would prove a happy end to the feud. So, when Juliet sent her old nurse to Romeo to find out what he proposed to do, she returned with happy news that all was well and all ready for them to be married the next day. So the next day, very early in the morning, Romeo and Juliet were married in Friar Lawrence's cell and parted with tears and sweet kisses. But that very day, something dreadful happened. Tybalt, the young man who had been so vexed at Romeo's attendance at a Capulet feast, met him and his two friends Benvolio and Mercutio in the street. He called Romeo a villain and challenged him to fight. Romeo had no desire to fight his new wife's cousin, but Mercutio drew his sword. Tybalt and Mercutio fought, and Mercutio was killed. When Romeo saw his best friend lying dead on the ground beside him, he forgot everything but anger at the man who had killed him. Romeo threw himself at Tybalt. Tybalt and Romeo fought, and Tybalt fell dead. So, on the same day as his marriage, Romeo had killed his new wife's cousin and was sentenced to be banished. That night, when Juliet met her young husband, the pair parted with bitter tears and heavy hearts, for they could not know when they would see each other again. Now, Juliet's father, who had no idea that she was already married, ordered her to wed Paris. When she refused, he became so furious that she ran to Friar Lawrence to ask for his help. "Pretend to agree," he said. "Then take this remedy that will make you seem dead for 2 days. That way, when they take you to church, it will be to bury you, not to marry you. You will lie in a Capulet's vault for 2 days, and when you awake, Romeo will be there to greet you." Now, Lord Capulet was thrilled to have finally got his way, and set about preparing for the wedding feast and inviting the guests. Everyone stayed up all night, for there was much to do and little time to do it in. Lord Capulet was anxious to marry Juliet as soon as possible, since he could see how unhappy she was. Of course, she was really fretting about her husband Romeo, but he believed she was grieving for her cousin Tybalt and thought that the marriage would prove a happy distraction. So, the next morning, when Juliet's nurse came to call on her and dress her for her wedding, she found that Juliet would not wake. And at last, the nurse cried out, "Alas, alas! Help, help, my lady's dead! Oh, well a day that ever I was born!" Lord Capulet came running in, followed by Lady Capulet and Paris, the bridegroom. But there lay Juliet, cold and white and lifeless, and for all their weeping, they could not wake her. So it was a burial that day instead of a marriage. Meanwhile, Friar Lawrence sent a messenger to Mantua with news of the plan for Romeo, and all would have been well, except the messenger was delayed and never reached Romeo. However, Romeo's manservant Balthazar, who knew of the marriage but not of the plans surrounding her death, heard about the funeral and hurried to Mantua to tell Romeo that his beloved wife, his sweetheart, lay cold in the grave. "Is it so?" cried Romeo. "Then I defy you stars! I will hence tonight. I will lie by my Juliet's side tonight." Romeo went to buy a vial of poison and hastened to the Capulet tomb where his beloved wife lay. When he arrived, he knelt next to his Juliet, spoke to her, held her in his arms, and kissed her cold lips, believing she was dead, while all the while she was coming ever nearer to the time of her awakening. He put the vial to his lips and drank the poison, and fell dead beside his sweetheart and wife. At that moment, poor Juliet awoke from her slumber only to find her beloved husband dead beside her. She saw the vial and realised all that had happened. And when she saw that there was no poison left for her, she drew her Romeo's dagger and thrust it through her heart. And so, her head falling on her Romeo's breast, she died. And there ends the fateful story of these most faithful but unhappy lovers. And when the families found out from Friar Lawrence all that had befallen, they were beside themselves with grief. Seeing the consequences that their petty feud had wrought, they repented of it and over the bodies of their dead children. Never was there a story of more woe than that of Juliet and her Romeo.